And hello, everyone. Welcome back into another edition of SEC Talk here on this Monday night. Monday night's now open. That Sports Scramble isn't rolling for the time being, so SEC Talk will be rolling either on Sunday night or Monday night. Just kind of depends,
We're like
if
the
we got
NFL,
plans.
baby.
Yeah, I got
Prime
it
time.
depends. Yeah, pretty much. It really just depends if we have plans or not, what time we roll it up. But another week in the SEC, and now we're going to be looking ahead to double digits already into week number 10. It feels like every season just flies by. We're already almost heading into the month of November. So just one more month left of this regular season. And then we're going to be talking about the college football playoffs here. We'll see how many SEC teams that we get into it. But other than that, Wade, how was your weekend?
Pretty good. I got to watch a little bit of the action. Unfortunately for the Tigers, it was not a good weekend for us. They were actually winning for the first half, which I watched, and then we went out for a little birthday celebration and dessert. And when I got back, we were losing. So, not the surprise I wanted to see, but there were some other good games. Texas and Vanderbilt was a surprisingly better game than a lot of people thought. And then, who else did I watch? I think that was about all the SEC football I watched. There were some good out of conference games in the Big Ten and the Big 12.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the Big Twin and the Big 12, I feel like, are those two conferences that have given good games. But yeah, if you live in the state of Louisiana, not a good football week. And the Saints continue to just suck every single week. Now, with six straight losses, that's the first time since the Katrina season. So I won't rant anything of that. We're just going to keep it positive here on this show. But let's get right into it here with our AP Top 25 poll updated here. I'm not sure when we'll get the college football playoff top 25 poll. That should be here in the next couple of weeks. We usually get it either in the first weekend of November, the second weekend of November. But we will just stick with the AP poll for now, as really not too much of changes. You do see there, Vanderbilt, they only lasted 1 week, which honestly I know like they lost by 3. I mean, they don't deserve to be out of the top 25 in my opinion. They have a quality win against Alabama. They did lose to Georgia State, so that is a tough loss to them. So Vanderbilt is out of the poll. But number 2, Georgia, they were on the bye week and they stayed the same. Oregon, they're looking like the number 1 team in the country. They absolutely bulldozed over Illinois. Penn State, they look good on the road. They got a big one this week against Ohio State. So we could see Penn State maybe with a victory leapfrog into that number 1 spot. We will do that to see. But Georgia remains number 2. Texas did fall from number 5 to number 6 after struggling a little bit against Vanderbilt, but Vanderbilt, they're a quality opponent. And then number 7, Tennessee, they fell a spot too. They were on the bye week. So, I mean, had a lot of teams moving up and down just because of the bye week this week. And then number 10, the big movers of the SEC, Texas A&M. They moved up from 4 to 10. Honestly, they should be more than that, to be honest with you. I'll ask that question in a couple of minutes. Number 14, Alabama, after a huge victory at home, 34 to nothing against Missouri. Missouri, their quarterback Brady Cook did start, but he did not really see much of this game. He was definitely not 100% in that one, and you just saw Brett Pine struggle a lot in Bryant-Denny Stadium. So good win for the Tide. You see the big fallers. LSU moves down all the way from 8 to number 16. Ole Miss with a big victory at home, a bounce back against Oklahoma. It wasn't pretty, but hey, a win is a win. So we see Ole Miss number 19. I'm honestly shocked that Missouri is still hanging on the top 25, as bad as they looked in those 2 losses against Texas A&M and Alabama. But even with the 2 losses, they still rank in the top 25. So I know that you mentioned last week that Texas A&M was number 14. Now you see is that number 10. Is that is that just right for the Aggies, or do you think that they should be a little bit higher?
I probably would have moved them directly into LSU spot at number 8. But I understand that they did lose a home game to Notre Dame, and Notre Dame's one of the teams ahead of them, deservedly so. But I think there's room for both of those teams in the top 10. And honestly, there's nothing A&M hasn't done that Tennessee has. I mean, Tennessee has a nice win over Alabama, sure, but I would say Texas A&M's win against LSU is comparable. So I would have those teams probably back to back or even swapped, honestly. but I think there's definitely room for Texas A&M in the top 10, maybe at number 9 or 8.
Yeah, absolutely. So you see 4 teams in the top 10, 8 teams overall in the AP Top 25 poll. So that's pretty good as we start to look ahead into week number 10 in the month of November here. So we'll see how many teams will be in the discussion for that college football playoff. Georgia and Texas are definitely looking strong. We'll see if A&M and Tennessee can take care of business. So let's now get into our reminder. If you have any questions pertaining to SEC football, feel free to leave us a comment and we will get to it after a hot topic segment later in the show. So let's get to one of our first segments here on this show. It is SEC Fantasy Week number 9 results. Feels like I have just been cruising on a win streak. So Wade, how about you talk about your team? And let's just say, if it wasn't for your defense, you probably would have broken the record of all-time points here in a week. So go ahead and talk about your team and see how they did.
But isn't it just fitting that the defense continues to hold me back even in my
You had
weeks
1
of
week
glory?
with Vanderbilt last week against Ball State, but Kentucky, yikes. Let's just say that.
Yeah. Yeah, you and I were talking about it before the show. We do have to pick a offensive player from every team, but we don't have to take every defense because there are more teams and weeks. But I haven't really thought about the longevity of that. I just kind of picked based off of matchups, and there weren't many good ones this week, so that's how I ended up with Kentucky. But we'll get to that in a second. Jackson Dart, he had a good game, both on the ground and through the air, showing those dual threat capabilities. He had 335 total yards, so a really good day for Jackson Dart as he paced Ole Miss to a win against Oklahoma. Jarquez Hunter, I mean, this was a slam dunk. We talked about that Kentucky defense being vulnerable to the run. I was expecting maybe like 107, but 297, I mean, that's damn near a conference record, maybe an SEC fantasy record at running back. Yeah, the game plan was pretty simple for Auburn. It was get the rock into Jarquez Hunter's hands. So my lone Auburn delegate of the season did his job, and I think he's earned an encore performance. I think we'll see him again on my team in the near future, but just a hell of a performance from him. Ryan Williams, he was pretty quiet. He's had a few quiet games in a row now.
Really
Alabama's going to have to get him going against LSU. What's that?
They didn't really need him. It was a blowout.
Yeah, that's true. He did kind of get game planned out of it with the Tide just dominating Missouri. Oftentimes they were working with the short field. So he's a guy that, I think he's pretty reliable down the stretch for our lineups. But the Kentucky defense, a head scratcher. I kind of thought the Auburn game would be first 1 to 20. Well, Auburn just dominated this football game. And this Kentucky defense has been really good at times when you'd expect them to not be, against Ole Miss. And then they've been really bad against teams like South Carolina and Auburn. So I don't know. I guess it's just a young bunch and just a team that's really up and down. But luckily they didn't cost me. I still was in the positives and scored 180 yards.
Yep, 185. So that's pretty dang good. I mean, your Jarquez Hunter or Jackson Dart saved the day for you because if none of them, I say Jarquez Hunter had 100 yards, then you would have been in the negatives, especially if Kentucky defense giving up 500 yards. So might have to build a statue in SEC fantasy land for Mr. Jarquez Hunter. That was an epic performance by him on Saturday. And a big victory. Yeah, much needed victory for Auburn.
Every yard he got cost my defense. So
yeah, absolutely. So 180. Yeah, I'm surprised by that. You picked Auburn to win the football game, but picked Kentucky's defense.
Well, I had already picked Auburn's defense, and they disappointed me. So I just can't pick the defense.
All right, 185 yards. We will see if you can end the losing streak here and get yourself back on the win column. As now we head to my team, Michael Van Buren. I'll take it. Even in the blowout that Arkansas handed to them, 58 points that the Hogs. So you could have done worse. I mean, you could have picked Mississippi State's defense, and they gave up over 600 total yards of offense, but 309 yards. Pretty solid day. Le'Veon Moss, Honestly, I should have just taken Marcel Reed the rushing yards because I would have gotten plenty of yards from him, especially in the second half. But 83 yards in the win over LSU. Jordan Watkins. We do have a note on this. Trey Harris did not play, so I just took the second wide receiver in line. That was Jordan Watkins, 59 yards. So you see, Jarquez Hunter outgained pretty much the entirety almost of my team. But Ole Miss's defense, 329 yards. Not a great showing by Ole Miss's defense. They struggled early, especially against Jackson Arnold, but 122. And there you go, Wade. You ended the streak. It feels like I've been winning for like the past 5 or 6 weeks. So that's got to feel really good. So tell the folks, I'm going to go ahead and back out. You're going to show us this Excel spreadsheet and update the viewers of where things stand after week 9 and heading into week 10 of SEC Fantasy.
Yeah, absolutely. Feels good to be a winner. But yeah, here's our season score. As you can see down here at the bottom, Tyler has 1,774 yards, and I have 1,331 yards on the season. That puts Tyler up 443 yards on the season. So I've got some work to do. I'm just 2-7 on the year. Tyler 7-2. But if I have some more big time performances, anything's possible. And then just to kind of let you know where we're at player wise, we've done a great job of spreading the wealth around the conference. With our individual players, we both need to pick a Gamecock and a Wildcat, though. Those are two of the more inconsistent offenses in the SEC, but we'll be sure to work them into the mix. And then the defenses, there's still some good ones to pick from, but as the season kind of comes to a close, there's going to be some really tough rivalry weeks and intra-conference matchups. So it'll be interesting to see how we strategize there. But Tyler's got a pretty hearty lead. But hey, it's time to build some momentum.
Hey, I mean, it's SEC fantasy. Crazier things have happened, but we will see. We got a couple more weeks left. And just a note: once the regular season, everything is going to be eliminated, and then the bowl season will start off fresh. We could just pick any player, any team. Everything is back on the chips. So 185 to 122 is your final score. So Wade will get the number one pick in this week's SEC Fantasy Draft. But before we get into that SEC Fantasy Draft, let's go through the rules in the rosters of how we formulate these SEC Fantasy rosters. So one quarterback, a running back, a wide receiver, and a defense makes up our 4-player roster. And then our 2 rules that we use every single week here on the show: cannot draft the same player twice in back-to-back weeks. So Jarquez Hunter put up almost 300 yards rushing. You can't have him again. And then once you draft a defense, you can't use him again. So we're 9 weeks to the season. 9 defenses have been used by us respectively. And now we head into week number 10. First with the quarterbacks, you're going to go with Mr. Go Diego Go. I definitely love this pick. I thought about going him a couple of weeks ago after his very terrific performance against Alabama. But Vanderbilt goes on the road to that Auburn team that we just talked about. So Diego Pavia coming off of a good performance against Texas. And then Jackson Dart, I feel like he's been the most used quarterback because, I mean, he just steps on the field and he throws for at least 300 yards every single week. But he does get a good matchup this week in Arkansas, a team the defense has been struggling too. So talk about Diego Pavia. Every time he steps on the field, he just balls out. So you're looking for his dual threat capabilities to continue against Auburn on Saturday.
Yeah, I mean, the guy's just given it all he has for the Commodores this year. And in the big time games against Alabama and Texas, it's resulted in a lot of yardage. Not only do they control the clock, but he picks up a lot of yards while he does it. And I think that he has a good opportunity here against Auburn. Auburn really struggled earlier this year with dual threat quarterbacks against Oklahoma. I know that because I picked their defense that week. So I think Pavia is just going to have just a signature game here. I believe the game's on the road, but that shouldn't matter. And I think Vanderbilt, maybe for the first time ever, is going to be a road favorite. Don't quote me on that, but I think there's potential for him to do a lot of damage this Saturday.
Yeah, and they're playing for bowl eligibility too, so there's a lot on the stake. And I'm glad that you picked them because it would have been an absolute sin if we went this whole entire season and nobody picked Diego Pavia in his last college football season. He's definitely been a star for the Commodores. We'll see if he can come away with a big victory over Auburn. I'm going to go Jackson Dart, like I mentioned, in a matchup that could be a high-scoring shootout. Taylor Green and that Arkansas offense just put up 58 points. I know it's Mississippi State to do that every single week, especially in the SEC, is pretty darn good. So I mean, it feels like every time that Ole Miss and Arkansas play, like both teams score over 40 points and crazy plays have happened all the way back to that 4th and 25 from a couple of years back. So I'm going to go with Jackson Dart. I haven't used him as much as you have, but I am going to go with Ole Miss's quarterback to just put up 300 yards once again, like he always does. So Diego Pavia and Jackson Dart are our two quarterbacks. Now let's go on to the running backs. Dylan Sampson, definitely the most used running back of this SEC fantasy. A new face, but not a new face in SEC fantasy. You saw him in a different uniform. And I'll talk a little bit why I'm picking him. So Dylan Sampson, you just talked about it. We just talked about Jarquez Center putting up almost the kitchen sink on Kentucky, and guess who Tennessee plays? Kentucky. So I'm guessing that's why you went with Dylan Sampson. It's just rinse and repeat at this point.
Yeah, I mean, it was a pretty desirable matchup here for Dylan Sampson to be able to put the SEC's top running back, at least in terms of touchdowns, up against Kentucky, who all of a sudden looks like Swiss cheese when it comes to run defense. So, I'm pretty excited about this matchup for Sampson. I mean, he's kind of become a weekly character for the two of us, but he's just that good. So Let's not overthink it. Great player, great matchup. Sampson's going to have a good week.
Yeah, I'll be shocked if he doesn't get at least 100 yards in this game, to be honest with you. I just think that Tennessee's going to watch film, be like, yep, we're just going to hand the ball off like 30 times to Dylan Sampson. He's just going to do his thing. Like I mentioned, Trevor Etienne, we saw with in Florida last year. This is a revenge game for him. He is coming off of a good performance against Texas rush defense, one of the best defenses in the country. So I expect this game to get out of hand pretty quickly here. I just think that this is an overmatch. Georgia's feeling themselves coming off of the bye. I know that Florida's coming off of the bye too. But Trevor Etienne, this just feels like a proven game for his former team that he's facing off against. So give me Etienne. So two talented running backs, with Sampson and Etienne. Now let's go on to the wide receivers. One new face here, though he's been picked a couple of years back. Brew McCoy, you see him with Tennessee. So we definitely like the Vols against Kentucky. And then Andrew Armstrong, the wide receiver of Arkansas. I picked him a couple of weeks back when they played LSU. So how do you like Andrew Armstrong's matchup? Do you also see this matchup getting high scoring too?
Yeah, I'm just following your lead with the Jackson Dart pick. I think that both of these offenses have a chance to make this an arms race. We got two.
I see what you did there.
Two dual threat quarterbacks and two alpha receivers. I mean, honestly, Andrew Armstrong and Trey Harris have been two of the more consistent wide receivers this season, and definitely their team's wide receiver one. So I just wanted to get a piece of the pie. I also considered Mississippi State's wide receiver, Kevin Coleman. He's had a really good hot streak for the Bulldogs, but I figured let's touch into that Arkansas-Ole Miss matchup.
Yeah, I've been getting a lot of new faces here. I have Trevor Etienne, who hasn't been picked, now Brew McCoy. Almost went with Squirrel White just because of the name, but Brew McCoy has been Nico's favorite target. I know that Dylan Sampson, he's going to do his thing, but this pass offense for Tennessee has to find the rhythm before they have Georgia looming here in a couple of weeks. So Brew McCoy coming off also a good performance last time we saw this Tennessee offense. So look for Brew McCoy. Just get back on track. That's probably another game where Tennessee just lights it up against Kentucky. So Brew McCoy and Andrew Armstrong. Now let's go on to the defenses. And these are probably the two best defensive picks. Both teams playing out of the conference. Mississippi State playing 1-6 UMass. We're hoping the Dogs can get a victory. And then Oklahoma playing Maine. So Mississippi State, you did originally pick Oklahoma, but you already picked Oklahoma. Like you mentioned, they let you down when they played earlier in the season. So you're going to go Mississippi State's defense, probably one of the worst defense in the SEC. But if you are going to take them, it is against a UMass team that's been struggling.
Yeah, this is the time to take them. Like I said, you don't have to pick every defense in the conference. Why am I messing around with a 1-6 Mississippi State team? I don't know. I mean, I thought about Tennessee, but I have confidence in the Bulldogs, and I'd like to save Tennessee for down the stretch. I mean, there's going to be some really tough SEC games, and it would be good to have the Vols in my back pocket. So I think you got the better defense here. Like you said, I did like the Sooners going up against Maine, obviously, and I think they're a better unit overall. But if you can't hang against UMass, I mean, you just
You may
really
have to
don't
ban
deserve to be
Mississippi
in the
State if they
SEC.
give like 300 to 400 yards to UMass.
And I would be all right. Anything under 350, I think it would be okay.
And I'm going to go with Oklahoma. The same thing that you have with Mississippi State. Looking at the rest of Oklahoma's games, I don't really trust their defense in. So you know what? You lose it. You gotta lose it. So I'm going to go with Oklahoma. I'm kind of getting thin on my defenses. Like most of the big boys, I've already used like Texas, Georgia, Alabama. I haven't used A&M, but surely I will use Texas A&M. If I don't, then I'm just an idiot for not picking Texas A&M's defense the whole season. But Oklahoma against Maine, just give me, under 200 yards and I'll be happy. So Oklahoma and Mississippi State, definitely the two best defenses to use as they go outside of the conference. So now let's go back into the conference with our games from week number 9. The first one was a high noon kickoff in Oxford. Number 18, Ole Miss face off against Oklahoma. Now going into this one, Ole Miss was a 20.5-point favorite. But Ole Miss ended up winning this one 26-14. It was a back and forth game, defensive game the first half. We did see Jackson Arnold get the start. He looked okay in the first half. I'm not going to say he played well, but Oklahoma in the first half played pretty well on defense. And then Ole Miss, you had pre-scoring their tight end step up. He had a big day, over 70 yards and a touchdown. So Ole Miss, after back-to-back losses, who do they lose to? They lost to LSU. What's the other loss? I can't remember. Oh, yeah. I can't even remember. It's just how the season's. Oh, yeah, that's right. Kentucky. How the heck did they lose to this Kentucky team that just gave up 500 yards?
If they didn't, they'd be playing at night next week, Lane.
Yep, absolutely. We'll definitely get into that later in the show. But 26-14, what are your overall thoughts in this one? Honestly, I wasn't impressed with either team.
No, I think Oklahoma probably made the right decision going back to Jackson Arnold. I think he gave him a fighting chance, at least early. But this Ole Miss offense has just not played well in the SEC. And, I mean, I think their best game was against LSU, and that was impressive at times in Death Valley. But even then, Jackson Dart made mistakes that you just can't make. And I don't think I don't know. I think their defense is saving them at some points, but I just keep waiting for this offense to explode for like 50 points. And it's not too late yet, but they got to get it going this week or else it's going to look pretty dire going into that Georgia game because it's do or die for Ole Miss right now. And winning 26-14 against a team that just got bullied by South Carolina is not a good look.
Yeah, I mean, this Ole Miss offense, like heading into this season, was supposed to be one of the best offenses in the SEC. All the returning talent. You have Trey Harris, you have Jordan Watkins pre-scoring, and then you brought in South Carolina, one of South Carolina's wide receivers, and Antoine Wells. And I don't know what's going on with this Ole Miss offense, but it hasn't looked pretty. And like you mentioned, I mean, if they do want to still make the college football playoff, they have to take care of business against Arkansas, and then you get Georgia next week. So another loss pretty much eliminates Ole Miss. But Oklahoma, they did look pretty good with Jackson Arnold. That's probably going to be their guy moving forward. I don't think they're going to go back to the freshman. Oklahoma, they're sitting at 4-4. We will see if the Sooners can get 2 more wins. Obviously, you have Maine this week, so that should give you your 5th, and then you have to get 1 victory to get you to bowl eligibility. Is that the season Oklahoma hope for in their first season in the SEC? No, but to get bowl eligibility will at least be a step. not in the right direction, but it would be a step. But for Ole Miss, definitely a disciplined showing in Oxford. I was hoping for a statement, but only a 12-point victory against Oklahoma. Definitely, if you're an Ole Miss fan, you're scratching your head as you head into this week's game against Arkansas. Let's move on to the next game, which featured a top 25 battle. Number 5, Texas at number 25, Vanderbilt. And this was a close back and forth game, but Texas led throughout this whole entire game. Vanderbilt did tie it a couple of times, but Texas was able to serve charge here after losing to Georgia just a week ago. As Texas 27-24. But I mean, man, every time that you play Vanderbilt this season, they're going to give you your all. So Texas, they struggled on offense. So this is like back-to-back weeks now. This Texas offense has struggled. So are you concerned with Texas moving forward after this showing, or is it more of Vanderbilt showing up in these big-time games week in and week out?
I think it just more kudos to Vanderbilt than concern with Texas. We knew that Vanderbilt was going to run their read option, try to control the clock, and they did that, and they made some gutsy fourth down conversions, very reminiscent of the Alabama game. So They just ended up on the other side of it. I think if there is concern for Texas, and I'm stealing this from my guy Aaron Murray, that Texas's offensive line is not as good as people hyped it up to be, and when they had Arch Manning in there, Arch Manning is a little bit more mobile. He can escape the pocket, extend plays. Quinn Ewers is a really, really talented quarterback, but he's not as mobile. So when you are able to get to him, I think this offense is very one-dimensional. They're already on to their third-string running back. So I guess I just have concern about the overall run game for Texas. And if the deep balls aren't there or the easy crossing routes aren't there, what does this team do? And if a team like Vanderbilt's providing that resistance, I can only imagine what's going to happen when they go into College Station, because that Texas A&M defense I saw this week is going to eat Texas's lunch on the offensive line, and they're going to have to really rely on that arm talent to make some deep throws.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll see if this Texas team could get back on track. They will go now on the bye week so they can get healthy, maybe figure things out. So they are probably going to stick with Quinn Ewers. I've heard a lot of people say, should they go to Arch Manning? I think you just got to stick with the veteran here.
I agree.
The rest of the
with them.
So big victory for Texas. I mean, Vanderbilt. I mean, if you have a number next to your name, they're going to play, do everything impossible. They almost did. They got it close. They were down by 10 late. They ended up recovering on onside kick to make it 27-24 there. But Texas, they did get back on track. Now let's go on to our SEC Talk game of the week. It was a top 15 battle here. Number 8 LSU traveling to College Station to face number 14 Texas A&M. The Aggies pulled out the 38-23 victory, but this was a tale of two halves. I mean, if you think that momentum isn't involved in sports, then you should have just watched this game of how momentum quickly changed for the Tigers, especially. So let's just talk about this whole game. Since this is our game of the week, we'll probably go more in depth into this one. So let's just talk about the first half. LSU, as they always do, it feels like every game they did get the ball first. They quickly went 3 and out. Texas A&M also went 3 and out. So it was just 2 punts early, and then LSU was able to strike first with a touchdown, and then they were able to get a field goal. And then ultimately they went up 17-7 at the half, but they had a lot of missed chances. 2 missed field goals by Damian Ramos, so he left 6 points up there on the board. So realistically, should have been 23-7, but you weren't able to execute on the special teams. So LSU feeling good about themselves going into the half, up by 10, especially on the road. And then Texas A&M and Mike Elko decide to pull Connor Weigman in this game and bring in Marcel Reed, a guy that has seen the field a lot in this game, in this season so far for Texas A&M, even though he is a freshman. And then boom, Garrett Nussmeier throws the interception. After that, Texas A&M outscored LSU 31-6 in the second half, as the Aggies, they were left for dead in the first half, but Marcel Reed ignited this. LSU's defense had no answer for the dual threat quarterback. And as you heard it in the post game from LSU's linebackers, they did LSU's coaching staff did not account. They didn't do anything to prepare for Marcel Reed stepping in, even though this is a guy that I just mentioned started 3 games so far this season. So I definitely want to get your thoughts on that comments. But what were your overall thoughts? You talked about it. You went away at the half thinking, okay, LSU just going to win this one, and then you come back and A&M is just putting it on the Tigers. So go ahead and give us your thoughts on this game.
Yeah, life comes at you quick.
Yeah.
No doubt. But yeah, I mean, you did a great job summarizing it. I think that early on, Garrett Nussmeier kind of continued the momentum he had, and A&M made the necessary adjustments on defense in the second half and made him look like the inferior quarterback on the field, because Marcel Reed came out of nowhere and just really gave this LSU team headaches with the read option. And, I'm not going to fault LSU too much for not preparing for that. I think that you did have to at least think he would come in situationally. So I'm sure they kind of practiced it in short yardage situations, maybe in goal line sets. Because I think when you have that dynamic of a runner that you can put in at quarterback, say down inside the 10-yard line, I think that kind of gives A&M a chance to score some touchdowns. But what you weren't accounting for was running the read option from the 40-yard line, and he rips off a 20, 30-yard run. And I hope that Blake Baker can get his guys settled and they can figure that out going forward, because there's going to be a lot of mobile quarterbacks down the stretch that LSU has to play. But as far as this game goes, it just seemed like one of those games where LSU needed to keep pushing the football downfield and answer Texas A&M scores, because the Marcel Reed train was not stopping, and this one just kind of got ugly quickly. And Garrett Nussmeier just was outmatched, didn't have it in him. A&M kept the pressure on him. I mean, they were putting him in the dirt, kind of like Texas's offensive line. This was an LSU offensive line that was really hyped up, especially in recent weeks. And here they are against probably the best defensive front they faced, and really didn't stand up to the test. So I think LSU's got some things to iron out. Definitely still a team that's alive in the playoff discussion, but Texas A&M has pole vaulted themselves into a leader of the playoff, and they're gonna have to take care of business against Texas. But I mean, everything's in front of them,
Yeah, I think that the biggest weakness of this LSU team this season has been the lack of the running game. You haven't really been able to balance out this offense. I feel like Garrett Nussmeier has a lot of pressure on his shoulders, because that's like all that they could have done on Saturday. They only had 30 yards rushing. I mean, you saw that big play by Caden Durham, and that was it. And that was like the only big run play that you had. That was like the first 2 possessions. After that, A&M's defense, we talked about it. They were one of the best defensive lines that LSU was going to face all season. And LSU's offensive line, they played well, but it just got away for them. Like their defense. And you got to tip your cap to Mike Elko. I mean, usually you see a coach just stick with their quarterback, but no, he went ahead. That was a really good move. It was a pretty bold move, but man, that move worked out to perfection for the Aggies, especially in the second half. So A&M, we talked about it. This was the battle for first place. And A&M now sits as the only undefeated team in the SEC. Who would have thought that in the preseason? Not one of us, that's for sure.
No, I thought it would take them a year or two to. Yeah, we both liked the hire, but we didn't think it was a.
Oh yeah, I thought it would have been like a next season thing. But man, did you see Mike Elko last in the post game? He was firing shots like, "Oh, we don't have a politician anymore talking fast anymore. Straight business." So yeah, I love Mike Elko. He's definitely a damn good hire for the Aggies. They're definitely going to be a force to be reckoned with. So we will see if A&M can finish the deal, as they have some big games coming up. So we will see. Now let's finish it off with the game that probably nobody watched unless you're an Auburn Kentucky fan. But Auburn ended up winning this game 24-10. We all were picking Auburn in this one, even though that Kentucky had played some big games this season. But Kentucky's offense definitely one of the worst in the SEC. Let's just say that. But Auburn, this was let's just hand the ball off to Jarquez Hunter and let him run for days. So let's go ahead and do this pretty quickly here. This was a game that it felt like it was a must-win for either team. So with Auburn now, how do you like their chances of finishing up? Do you see them going to maybe like 6-6 to just get over that, or do you not have this team quite yet getting to the bowl?
This is definitely good momentum, and I think that this team can go as far as Jarquez Hunter takes
That is
them.
true.
I mean, you can beat Vanderbilt at home, no doubt. I think Vanderbilt's been the more complete team, but they're not exactly offensive wizards. They're going to play a very similar style offense that Auburn's going to use. So, yeah, I think if you want to go to a bowl game, you absolutely have to win that game. But, yeah, this team is heading in the right direction. They probably should have beat Missouri. Kentucky, they're trending in the wrong direction. We thought they were a force to be reckoned with after they beat Ole Miss. Then they lose to Florida, and then they get just manhandled by Jarquez Hunter. And, oh, yeah, now they have to play the best SEC running back. So, yeah, not looking good for the Wildcats.
Nope, not at all. Kentucky is definitely looking like one of the worst teams in the SEC, which we probably wouldn't have said that after they beat Ole Miss and they like barely beat Georgia. I don't know. This team's just a shot in the dark, it feels like. So those are our games to recap here in week number 9. Now let's go on to see how we did in the picks. And give yourself a round of applause, Wade. 6-0.
An SEC fantasy win and a 6-0. Okay.
Yeah, pretty solid week here on the show for you. 6-0. You did go with Auburn, and then you also went with Texas A&M. You were the lone Aggie to pick that one, so that was huge for you. So 6-0. I went 4-2, and Chet went 500, 3-3. So not too shabby. Our first undefeated. Took us 9 weeks, but we're here with Wade getting 6-0. So congratulations to you. Let's see if you can do it in back-to-back weeks as we now go to week 10 games in Pick'em, starting with the 11 a.m. game. Nope, this is not a night game, Lane Kiffin. You were stuck at an 11 a.m. game with 19 Ole Miss at Arkansas. I think that we're both on the trajectory that this is going to be a high-scoring shootout, but who do you have winning this battle between the Hogs and the Rebs?
I think this is going to be a very back and forth football game. I'm not going to say it's going to get into the 40s, but I do think it will get into the 30s. Both teams can run the football, so I think that will choose some clock, but I don't think there'll be a lot of stops on defense. But I'm going to go with the home team in the early kickoff here, and I think this is the nail in the coffin for Kiffin and Ole Miss. I mean, they're thinking about next week already, and they know there's a lot of pressure on them next week to beat the number 2 team in the country. Well, Arkansas is going to make it easy on them because they can just play for fun next week because their season's going to be over.
Okay, all right. Bold statement there for picking the Hogs on that one. So, yeah, I think that there's going to be a lot of fireworks in this one. I think that obviously the early game, I think, favors Arkansas in this one. I mean, obviously they won a night game because last time we saw them under the lights in a big game like this was obviously against LSU, but they do have the big matchup. As of late, and this is not the offense that you want to step in, but like we just mentioned, this Ole Miss offense, I feel like hasn't really reached their potential this whole season. So as of you, I know that I picked Jackson Dart, but I like the Hogs in this spot. I think that they're starting to build some momentum. This is a team that's playing for their coach in Sam Pittman. I think that both of us would have thought that Pittman wouldn't have been their coach by the time this season. But Arkansas, they've been one of the underrated teams in the SEC. It feels like a couple of games they should have won that turned ultimately into a loss. So I think that this is going to be like a 35 to like 31 type of game, a high-scoring game between both of these teams. So both of us roll with the Hogs. Do we have a clean sweep? No, we do not. Chet is going with
He's been a bit of a homer this year.
Yep, he has. He hasn't picked a lot of Mississippi State, but he has picked a lot of Ole Miss this season. So we have 2 Hogs and 1 rolling with Hottie Toddy against Arkansas. Now let's continue on with the early window. Vanderbilt at Auburn. Both of these teams are still in the bowl eligibility mix. Vanderbilt just needs 1 more victory. I believe Auburn needs 2 more victories to get to that 6th spot. So do you have Vandy going bowling, or do you have Auburn continuing on a little win streak here?
It's always tough to play at Auburn. no doubt, and Auburn's got a little bit of momentum. But I think this Vanderbilt team's legitimately good, and I think they get it done. I'm not saying they're a playoff team, but like I think this team won't stop at 6 wins. I think they get to 8 wins. Um, even if it's 7, that's still a really good season. So, um, yeah, I think Vanderbilt gets it done on the road here. If they don't, it's not time to panic. They can probably beat South Carolina, but I think they can go win a road SEC game.
Yeah, this is gonna. If you like teams that love to run the football, just watch this game because there's gonna be a lot of Cedric Alexander and Jarquez Hunter being mentioned in the broadcast. I think that this is gonna be a lower scoring game. I think that both defenses has been playing well as of late. I know Auburn's defense early on did have some struggles. Vanderbilt's defense really playing well down the stretch. But I am gonna go with the home team here in Auburn. I definitely liked what I saw them against, they saw something. I mean, just hand the ball to Jarquez Hunter, and there you
Mhm.
go. So I think that Peyton Thorne also, he doesn't have to have like his game of the life for them to beat Vanderbilt. I think that Vanderbilt is a different team when they head onto the road. And like you mentioned, in a place like Jordan Hare, it feels like Auburn hasn't really had that game at home where they needed to win. This is the one that they need to get if they do want to get to that 6 win. So give me Auburn at home. And Chet's also going to go with the doors. So I'm the lone war eagle on this one. So that could either hurt me or help me here in the standings in week number 10. We will just see how this game shakes out. Now let's go on to the next one, Maine at Oklahoma. This was one of the games. We're heading into week 10. We hate these type of games. But Maine, Oklahoma, I guess we're just going to go with Oklahoma again, their 5th win of the season, moving on back to SEC play.
Yeah, no hiccups here. Jackson Arnold's your guy. Let him wild.
Yeah, absolutely. So now let's go on to our SEC talk game of the week. It's Florida versus number 2 Georgia. It's the annual rivalry game in Jacksonville, Florida. Both teams are coming off of the bye week. If you're mentioning why is this game of the week, well, if you look at all the rest of the games, there's really not much to pick from. So I just went with the lone rivalry game this week, and that is Florida Georgia. It's always a treat. Has been dominated in the past couple of years by Georgia, DJ Lagway with Florida. That offense has been rolling as of late. Last time we saw them, they put up a 40 spot on other than Kentucky. Everybody just putting up a lot of yardage on this Kentucky offense, Kentucky defense, excuse me. But do you have this one at least being close, or do you just have this being a runaway for the Dogs?
I think Georgia's kind of hitting their stride here. I pause because I do think DJ Lagway is an interesting quarterback. I think that he's going to have some moments in this game that make you really believe that he's special, but I also think he's going to get suckered into some mistakes. So I think Georgia's going to pull away, and I think ultimately it won't be close, but you might have a ball game in the first half, but it's going to be 45-24.
Yeah, I mean, Georgia, they got punched in the mouth early on in the season. You saw them with Kirby Smart and them, how they looked against Texas. I think that train is going to continue rolling on. I wouldn't be surprised if they just went out. They see them 11-1 and back in Atlanta where they belong. So give me Georgia. I love to see this game be close for at least like 3/4. But do I see it? No, I do not. I think that Georgia too much of a mismatch of this defense. I mean, this DJ Lagway hasn't seen a defense this season. I mean, he played against Texas A&M for a brief moment, but Georgia's defense are going to go hunting against that freshman. So give me the Dogs pretty convincingly here, and Chet's also going to go with the Dogs to continue on their win streak against the Gators in this annual rivalry game down there in the Sunshine State. All right, it's the battle of the 1-6 teams, UMass and Mississippi State. UMass, last time we saw them, they got pounced by Missouri. Does Mississippi State get their 2nd win? And this will probably be their only win of the season, the way that they've been looking as of late. But do we have Mississippi State getting their 2nd win of the season, or do we have the Minutemen going on the road and pulling off a shocker, even though it wouldn't be much of a shocker?
I remember. I just had a random thought. I remembered when these two teams played
Yep.
in Foxborough, I think, in the Patriot Stadium, and it was a wacky game. I expect another wacky game here, but I think Mississippi State gets it done. I sure hope they do. I picked their fantasy defense.
Yeah, I don't know what to expect, but I do expect Mississippi State. I've been picking Mississippi State to get a victory. I picked them to beat Texas A&M. L. I picked them to beat Arkansas. Another L. This is it. I'm done with Mississippi State after this. Picking them, they have let me down every single week. So I swear, if they let me down against freaking 1-6 UMass, I am banning them for. I'm not even a like. If Mississippi State has a game, we're not picking them. They're just banned the rest of the season. But we're all going with Hail State in this one to win in the battle of the 1-6. Who would have thought that? But let's go on to the next game. Number 10, Texas A&M at South Carolina. This is a typical letdown spot. I feel like we talk about it every single time. We have one team, A&M coming off of a big win at home. Now they have to go on the road at night against a hostile crowd of South Carolina. It feels like South Carolina, they had some big games at home, but they just haven't won it. Is this the game that South Carolina finally does it?
Well, it is interesting. I mean, Marcel Reed has the biggest head in college football right now, and he's playing on the road in a hostile environment at
This
night.
is a pretty good defense, too.
Yeah, and they know how to contain the mobile quarterbacks pretty well. These fans have been clamoring for a night game. They finally get it. I'm going with Texas A&M, though, because South Carolina just historically has really struggled against Texas A&M, even when South Carolina's had some really good teams and Texas A&M has not. The Aggies still find a way to go into Williams-Brice and win at night. So I can't discount that. This is probably the best team they've brought to that stadium in quite some time. So I think they continue their winning ways, but I wouldn't be surprised if you look up and see South Carolina up, at the half or something in this game. But I do think A&M ekes out.
Oh, I wouldn't be surprised either. I mean, I was really close of going with the upset, but ultimately I went with Texas A&M. The way that they're playing down the stretch has really caught my eye. South Carolina, I think that this is the battle of two of the best defensive fronts in the SEC that you're going to see with A&M and South Carolina. They're going to get after you. These are two teams that do like to run the ball pretty heavily. You're going to see a lot of Le'Veon Moss, and you're going to see a lot of Raheem Rocket Sanders in this one. So you'll probably see Marcel reading this one. I just don't see how you go back to Connor Weigman, especially on the road. I know you're going to be playing a true freshman, but, I mean, South Carolina has struggled against dual-threat quarterbacks. I mean, you saw Jackson Dart. I mean, he's not much of a dual-threat quarterback as Marcel Reed likes to be, but I think this is going to be a close game, a low-scoring game, two really talented defenses. I'm going to go like 24-21 the Aggies. But, I would not be shocked if South Carolina does pull off the upset. This just screams an upset to me. Let's see if Chev does it. Yes, he does. There he is. He's going with the Gamecocks to pull off the upset. But like you mentioned, Texas A&M has controlled this series. We'll see if South Carolina and Shane Beamer can pull it out. So 2 on the Ags, 1 on the Gamecocks. And that's going on to the next one, Kentucky at number 7, Tennessee. Not only is Kentucky coming off of like back-to-back of dud performances, but now they have to walk into a hostile environment. And guess what Tennessee's doing? They're going to be wearing all black. So that is just not what you want to walk into if you're Kentucky. So I'm guessing we're all rolling with Rocky Top in this one to win pretty big.
Yeah, I don't see how Kentucky can hang in this one. I mean, for all the reasons you mentioned, I think Tennessee wins this one pretty convincingly.
Yeah, this will be over by the half. I mean, I was going to pick Tennessee, but man, I am just a sucker for the All Blacks. And man, Tennessee's All Blacks are one of my favorites in all of college football. So, yep, that's all I needed to see. Tennessee probably wins this one like 34-10, in my opinion, something like that. I think that Nico in this offense will prevail. Dylan Sampson probably going to run for like 500 rush yards, and this will be over pretty quickly here as Chet's also going to go. So we're all rolling with Big Orange to win this one against Big Blue. So we will see if Kentucky will have better luck on the court because their football team isn't providing much. So let's go on to our first topic. Should Marcel Reed be the starter for the Aggies for the rest of the year?
Yeah, I mean, I think that he gives you the best chance. Connor Weigman, he's just kind of average, I guess. And this is a top 10 team.
Below than average.
Yeah, you can't have that liability at quarterback. I'm not saying Marcel Reed is going to be a a top quarterback in college football, but I think you can design your offense in a creative way around him, and I think you got to do it.
Let's preview a game that we're going to be talking about heavily next week: LSU versus Alabama. Do you think that this is de facto college football playoff elimination game?
Yeah, I mean, I think it definitely shapes up that way. Both teams are on the bye week, so there's no surprise losses, and it might be a situation where neither one makes the playoff, but
Hmm.
certainly the loser will be out with 3 losses.
Yeah, I mean, there's already announced today that this is going to be a night game, 6:30 on ABC. So that honestly, if it's 6:30 on ABC, it feels like College Game Day has already like made up their minds and going to Baton Rouge. So we will have to keep an eye on that. I haven't looked at the schedule next week, but it feels like LSU and Alabama is probably going to be the front runner for that. So early pick, who you leaning towards in this matchup, LSU or Alabama? You don't have to give me outright, but who you leaning in this matchup next week?
I think the home environment goes a long way for LSU. LSU fans are very hungry for another home win against Alabama. LSU is excited to try to knock Alabama off the throne, and you can do that with a win against them. I mean, when's the last time Alabama's had 3 losses? And that's truly the elimination number now is
Hmm.
okay, if you get a team to 3 losses, it's very unlikely they make the playoff. So even in previous years, LSU's beaten Alabama, and then Alabama still makes the playoff, like they did
Hmm.
in 2022
Won't
and
happen this year.
needless 2011. So you can finally eliminate them for good.
Yeah, that's got
Um,
to feel really good. I mean, you get to eliminate your rival from playoff contention. There's going to be a lot at stake in this game next week.
yeah, and I think the players know that. Fans certainly know it. Coaches know it. So
Yeah.
I'm leaning towards LSU right now. I do think that Jalen Milroe is one special player, and Ryan Williams. I'm sure he's looking to make his mark on this rivalry game his freshman year. So I don't think it's going to be easy by any means, but I do like LSU at home, especially if game day's here. I think that adds an extra layer.
Yep.
Um, but they got to figure out the dual threat quarterback
Yeah, they
because
do. They have 2 weeks to do it.
Milroe can run that read option way better than Marcel Reed can. But you know it's coming.
Yeah, absolutely. If you saw last year's game, that's all. Jalen Miller had like 4 touchdowns the whole game. So they didn't learn last year. They better learn this year. As like you mentioned, this is a college football playoff elimination game. So Tiger Stadium is definitely going to feel like a playoff environment because the loser of this is out of the playoff, and the winner will survive another day as long as they take care of business the rest of the way. Because LSU and Alabama already with 2 losses, they have to win out if they do want to make it to the playoff this season. The next one, can Kentucky save their season, or do you think that this is all a wrap for the 2024 season for the Cats?
Um, I honestly don't know. This team's just been so up and down, but I think they're going to get kicked in the teeth again this Saturday, and I think that will probably
Yeah, that'll be
be
the
about
KO
it
for
for Kentucky.
them. I
It's hard to come
completely
back from
agree.
that.
So let's go now to the last hot topic. Which team in the SEC impressed you the most in week number 9?
I think Texas A&M's the obvious answer here. They are the only undefeated team left in the conference, and you can't say they don't have a signature win because they just got one against LSU. But I'm also impressed with Vanderbilt. I mean, I
Mm-hmm.
think that they showed the Alabama game wasn't a fluke. They were very close to beating Texas at home. So I believe in them a lot more than I did a week ago. So they're winners in that regard, but Texas A&M definitely took the cake.
I know that this is a team that just beat a 1-6 team, but I gotta go for Arkansas. I mean, that was impressive. I picked against Arkansas. I don't know what the heck I'm thinking of these days. Just rolling Mississippi State every single week. But after really struggling against an LSU defense that has definitely been finding the rhythm as of late, I know that in the second half they didn't look good. But Taylor Green, he had himself a heck of a day. I mean, if you would have one of us would have picked them. Taylor Green was another quarterback that went over 300 yards passing too. So one of his best days in Arkansas uniform. So I think that overall on the season, Arkansas has been a team that has impressed me. So this is a team, get a couple of wins, get you a good bowl game, and save Sam Pittman's job. And I think that if I would ask you that question, if we would have saw Sam Pittman week number 10, you probably wouldn't have said that. I'm even shocked that Billy Napier is still in Gainesville too. So those are two coaches that we thought would have been long gone, but they're still here with us. So Arkansas is my impressive team. Obviously, Texas A&M, that's definitely a good pick. We will see those teams can continue on their winning ways. We do have a comment to get to with LSU loss against Texas A&M. Hopefully they can win this weekend. So they do have a bye, and then they will have that LSU and Alabama game, which is always a treat. I feel like if you're a college football fan, you got to watch into that LSU-Alabama game. And it feels like this year, we just said it, stakes are even higher. The winner still in the playoff race. The loser is out of the race. So if you're in Tiger Stadium next week, if you don't have a voice by the end of the game, then you did not do your job. So we will see if Tiger fans can show up. That should definitely be a treat. That will probably be our SEC Talk game of the week. Next week, we do have Georgia and Ole Miss next week. So that is a big game, especially if Ole Miss and Georgia take care of business this week. But we are guaranteed a top 15 matchup with I know that LSU is number 16, but let's be real. There's going to be a lot of chaos this week, and LSU is going to get right back in the top 15. So we will get to that matchup and more in week number 11. So that is it for SEC Talk here in week number 10. We appreciate everybody for tuning in. We will see y'all back here on next week's show as we recap some of the bigger games that we saw in week number 10 and look ahead to week 11 as we look now to the first week of action here in November, and then we'll get into our second weekend as we count down into that SEC championship with a lot of games still to be played. So we appreciate everybody for tuning in. Hope everybody enjoys the rest of your week, and we will see y'all here next time right here on the SEC Talk. So long for now.